great idea for you at this point, if you need to take some time to do a review of basic English grammar. Your goal would be to become familiar with the basic structure of English and the terminology used to describe it. This will give you a good foundation for the next tutorials, which introduce the variety of possible structures that you may encounter in other languages. There are many resources for reviewing English grammar which are easy to use and that you might even find enjoyable. For example, 2 free online resources are English Grammar 101. Now this is a good resource for basic English grammar exercises with online modules you can do as a review. And then the Internet Grammar of English is an online course in English grammar written primarily for university undergraduates with information and exercises on basic grammar. It also includes a good glossary of terms. So what is syntax? Knowing a language doesn't just mean knowing all its sounds and words. It also means unconsciously knowing the principles for how words are put together to build sentences. These sets of unconscious principles are called the syntax of a language. So if a speaker uses the correct rules for connecting words together, it's possible for them to create an infinite number of sentences, all of which are meaningful to a listener who also knows the same rules. The rules of grammar do not have to be explicitly understood by the speaker of the language or the listener. The majority of native speakers of a language will have no formal knowledge of the grammar of their language, but are still capable of speaking the language grammatically to a great degree of accuracy. Native speakers of a language assimilate these rules subconsciously while the language is being learned as a child. As we said before, the grammar of a language has several components. So the phonetics that governs the structure of sounds, the morphology that governs the structure of words, the syntax that governs the structure of sentences, and the semantics which governs the meaning of words and sentences. Since we've already investigated phonetics and morphology, now we're going to focus on syntax, and later we'll begin to look into semantics. There are 2 main areas of syntax that overlap and are connected: phrase structure and argument structure. So the phrase structure of a language is the set of principles about how words are put together to make phrases and how words and phrases are put together to build sentences. Phrase structure is also often called constituent structure because it deals with the way the constituents, the separate parts of a sentence, are put together. Argument structure is about the way the participants in an event are expressed in the grammar of a sentence. Now here the term argument doesn't mean a disagreement. So in the sentence, Mary saw the dog, the event has 2 participants or 2 arguments, Mary and the dog. One is the subject of the sentence and the other is the object. One is the participant who does the seeing and the other is the one who gets seen. The way language tells us which is the subject and which is the object and so forth is called argument structure. Okay. An example of the phrase structure in English is the fact that most adjectives come before the noun they're telling us more about. So, for example, we have the red house, the big dog, the yellow sun. But other languages have a different phrase structure. For example, in French, most adjectives come after the noun, the house red. And this is also true for Arta, a language from PNG. They would also say the house red. The main parts of a sentence are the subject, the object, and the verb. Different languages use different orders for these 3 parts in sentences. So there are 6 possible orders: SVO, SOV, VSO, VOS, OSV, and OVS. But most languages, over 80%, have the subject of the sentence first. Only a very small number have the object of the sentence first. Also, over 90% of languages have the verb and the object together. This makes sense because the relationship between a verb and its object is particularly important. Why? Because if the verb and the object are next to each other, there can be a verb phrase, and every sentence must have a noun phrase and a verb phrase to make sense. We are first going to look at some examples from English to show you how to diagram and discover how syntax works in your own language, and then later we'll take a look at some examples in other languages. Sentences are made up of smaller phrases. There are several different types of phrase that can be used in a sentence, but the two phrases which must be used in a sentence for it to make sense are a noun phrase and a verb phrase. In a phrase, we must have a word which is called the head. This is the core of the phrase, what the phrase can't exist without. So, in a phrase like the dog, dog is the head because it is the main part of the phrase. Or in the phrase ran far away, ran is the head because it is essential for the phrase to exist. So we can have dog ran, which isn't grammatical, but this makes sense since we can understand that the dog ran. But we can't have the far away. This makes no sense to us. So the and far away have to be given a name to distinguish them from the head, and we call these modifiers. They modify the head and give it specific meaning. So the determiner, the, modifies the dog because it lets us know which dog we are referring to. The phrase far away modifies the verb ran by letting us know the extent to which the dog ran. Now, noun phrases. A noun phrase is usually the person or thing that is performing the verb in the sentence. It may also be the person or thing that the verb is being done to in a sentence. So the person doing the verb in a sentence is known as the subject. For example, in the sentence, Tom pushed the car, Tom is the subject of the sentence as he is pushing the car. The car is the object in the sentence as the car is the object that the verb is being done to. And both of these are noun phrases. A noun phrase has to contain a noun, such as a name or a tangible object. Sometimes a determiner is also needed in a noun phrase, for example, a cat, the dog. A and the are called determiners because they tell us which person or thing is involved in the sentence. To explain sentence structures, we draw trees like the one here. It's actually a lot more complicated than it looks, so we will explain it step by step. We'll start with the noun phrase, the car. We know a noun phrase is made up of a determiner and a noun, so first we label what parts of speech each of these are. The is a determiner and car is a noun. Next, we can draw two lines to join them together, creating a noun phrase. Now, if we look at the proper noun Tom, we find it's a little bit different. A proper noun does not need a determiner, so we can go straight to making it another noun phrase. Now, we have drawn noun phrases for both Tom and the car in our sentence, but we aren't quite finished yet. Now we need to talk about verb phrases. The good news is that a basic verb phrase can be made up of one word. The bad news is that not every sentence has a basic verb phrase. So for now, let's look at the basic verb phrase and how the verb phrase fits in. So first, we identify the verb and label its part of speech. Next, we can label it as a verb phrase. This is connected to the noun phrase, the car, so we connect them and write the label above. But why is this the case? In this sentence, we must join up all of the phrases to make a tree that says sentence at the top. But we can't just simply join up the lines, we need a structure. So in order to figure out the correct structure, we need to look at constituents and how they're related to one another. In most languages, words can't just be put together in any order. For example, look at this sentence. Last Tuesday, the big fat cat chased the small ugly dog. You can understand the meaning of that sentence because of the way the words are grouped together into phrases, in the way that English grammar requires. But if it's written like this, it no longer makes any sense. Small, big, chased, Tuesday, dog, ugly, fat, the last cat, the. This second sentence is ungrammatical. For it to be grammatical, the words the, big, fat and cat have to group together in a particular way to form a particular kind of phrase. Words are the most basic building blocks that are used to build sentences. They are the component parts or the constituents of a sentence. And words can also group together into larger units called phrases. So groups of words, phrases, are also constituents. Syntax uses constituents as building blocks, and constituents can either be words or phrases. Syntax does not have a flat structure where words just follow each other in a row. Words join with other words to form phrases, and they in turn join with other words and phrases to form bigger phrases, and so on. So syntax has a hierarchical and nested structure where constituents combine with other constituents to form bigger constituents, which combine with other constituents to form even bigger constituents right up to sentences. That is why it's helpful to draw syntax trees, because they represent this hierarchical structure. So in our example here, big and fat combine to form the phrase big fat, which then combines with cat to form the phrase big fat cat, which joins with the to form the phrase the big fat cat, which then combines with chased to form the phrase the big fat cat chased, and so forth. Or to put it the other way around, constituents like sentences contain smaller constituents such as phrases, and these in turn contain even smaller constituents such as words and phrases, all the way down to each individual word. So, what is a constituent? A constituent is a word or a group of words that function together as a unit. We can figure out fairly easily what words or groups of words are constituents by performing tests on them. There are 4 tests which can be used on any suspected constituent. So these are omission, so create the same sentence but take away the word or the words that we're testing. Replacement, can we replace the word or the words with just a single word? The standalone test, can we form a question using the sentence and the answer be the word or the words being tested? And finally, movement. Can we move the position of the word or the words in the sentence and have the sentence still make sense without changing the meaning? So let's do some examples of these tests so you can see how they work. First, omission. So if we take the sentence, he sat down in the car, we can use the omission test to figure out the constituents in the sentence. So let's take in the car as our constituent. If we take this away, does the sentence still make sense grammatically? So we've got he sat down in the car and then just he sat down. So the sentence still makes sense. So in the car is likely to be a constituent. However, we can't be certain yet. It's always important to do more than one constituency test to find out if the word or the words are constituents. It could pass one and fail all the other 3 tests. So let's do replacement next. So we can take he sat down in the car and replace in the car with just one word. So useful words to try and use in a replacement test are pronouns. He, she, it, this, that, and things like that. So he sat down in the car, or you could say he sat down there. The sentence makes sense again. So in the car has passed 2 constituency tests. But let's try another test as well. Time for the standalone test. So we need to form a question using the rest of the sentence and have the answer only be the word or words that we're testing. So we could say, where did he sit down? And the answer would be in the car. So we have success. It surely must be a constituent now. But we'll just do the final test as well of movement. So can we move the words we're testing to see if the sentence still makes sense? So we can say rather than he sat down in the car, it was in the car that he sat down. So once again, the sentence makes sense. Now that we've done these constituency tests, we know that in the car is a constituent of the sentence, he sat down in the car. But be careful, because just because it's a constituent here does not mean that it is a constituent in every other sentence. So now we can identify constituents, let's go back to our tree. There are several important relationships in a syntax tree that we need to know about. Firstly, domination. Phrases can dominate words in a sentence tree, but how do we know which phrases dominate what? We said that a syntax tree has a hierarchical structure, which means that one label dominates all that is below it. So look at this picture. We can see here that phrase A dominates phrase B and the word in. We know this because phrase A is above phrase B and it is above the word in. So when a phrase is directly above something, we call this immediate domination. Phrase A immediately dominates phrase B and in, but it does not immediately dominate the or car. But it is important to remember that even though it doesn't immediately dominate the and car, it does still dominate these two words because it is above them in the tree structure. So we looked before at verb phrases and noun phrases, but these aren't the only types of phrases you can have in a tree. We can also have adjective phrases, adverb phrases, and prepositional phrases. So we'll quickly talk about how these are different to the other phrases. Since phrases are named after the head, adjective phrases are simply phrases where the head of the phrase is an adjective. So, for example, the sentence, "The big red car drove away," contains the phrase, "the big red car," and this includes the adjectives big and red. An adjective phrase can contain more than one adjective, so we can make big red into a phrase. But that's not all, since we have to add the determiner "the" to complete the phrase, and from there we can continue to build up the tree. Now, adverb phrases work a lot like adjective phrases. They're found near to verbs because adverbs describe the verb, such as immediately in the sentence, "He sat down immediately." They're very easy to recognise and often form adverb phrases containing just one word, the adverb itself. But be careful, adverbs can appear in a sentence and not be an adverb phrase. They're often used to modify an adjective, such as the immediately recognisable man. Here, the adverb immediately does not form an adverb phrase, but it modifies the adjective in the adjective phrase immediately recognisable. Another type of phrase that's very common in sentence structures is the prepositional phrase. They may seem complicated at first, but they'll get easier to recognise with some practice. If we take the sentence, "The cat slept in the kitchen," we can break it down and analyse it to see where the prepositional phrase is. So having labelled each word with its part of speech, we can see we have the preposition in this sentence. So let's start putting it together. Hopefully by now you can see that the cat is a noun phrase and you can connect it. You should have also seen that the kitchen is a noun phrase and join that up as well. Okay, so now let's join up in. When we connect in and the noun phrase the kitchen, we create a new phrase. This phrase is immediately dominating the noun phrase and the preposition in. Therefore, we've made a preposition phrase. The noun phrase the kitchen is modifying the location of where the cat slept, meaning it's modifying the word in. So we know that in is the head of this phrase, making it a preposition phrase. But we aren't quite finished yet. The preposition phrase in the kitchen modifies the verb slept. So now we join up the verb slept and the preposition phrase in the kitchen to make a new phrase. So can you figure out what phrase we make here? It's a verb phrase. So this is because the verb is the head of the phrase and in the kitchen modifies it. So now we have a noun phrase and a verb phrase left, and we can join them together to make a sentence. Now usually when you'd want to join a word to a phrase, the word you are adding will be the head of the phrase, meaning that whatever part of speech it is, the phrase will be named after that part of speech. So if we join a noun to an adjective phrase, we'll make a noun phrase. And if we join a verb to a noun phrase, we'll make a verb phrase. Coordinate phrases are rare phrases that do appear in English. You will have used them already when you say things like fish and chips, Max and Ben, and pretty much any situation where you join two nouns together using the conjunction and. So how do we deal with these? Well, here we have the sentence, Max and Ben ate their dinner. We've labelled the words and we can construct the tree for the verb phrase, but we need to make a noun phrase for Max and Ben. So how do we make the noun phrase? Well, Max and Ben are both proper nouns, meaning that they don't need a determiner. So here we simply join Max and Ben together at the same time. We can then label this as a noun phrase and join it to the verb phrase as a sentence. But what if we don't have proper nouns? Let's take the sentence, the boy and the girl ate their tea. So again, we can form several noun phrases here and a verb phrase, but what do we do with these first two noun phrases that are next to each other? So we've got the noun phrase the boy and the noun phrase the girl with and sitting in the middle of them. So now we can join them up like we did with the proper nouns, making a noun phrase that we can use to build the complete sentence.